everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Benchmarks Symposium, a video series about our 2023 State of Promotional Review Benchmarks Report. I'm Annalise, Senior Manager of Marketing and Communications at Vodori, and today I'm joined by Elizabeth Calderon, a Customer Success Manager at Vodori. Elizabeth, thanks so much for joining.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Could you please just introduce yourself and tell the folks that are watching sort of a little bit about your role at Vodori?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like you mentioned, I'm a customer success manager at Vodori. And in my role, I have the pleasure of advising our customers on best practices, sharing tips and tricks to really ensure that they're receiving the maximum value out of our products, and also ensuring that our customers are meeting and achieving their outcomes and their goals with our products.
That's awesome. I'm really excited to get your insight and perspective because, as you said, you are one with the boots on the ground with our customers. And so when it comes to best practices, you are one of the folks that I knock on doors to say, hey, let's talk about some process optimization best practices. So let's talk about the benchmarks report. One of the things that sort of came out of this year's report is this idea that organizations are asked to be doing a little bit more with less, right? There are resource constraints that organizations are bumping up against. Budgets look a little bit different. There's a lot of internal and external factors that are sort of putting pressure on organizations to do more with less. And I'm curious, considering your work with our customers, what would you tell people as some best practices to consider to sort of overcome this challenge that we expect is going to continue on into the next year as well?
Yeah, that's a good topic because when I took a step back, I realized that there were themes of conversations that I was having with my customers, especially this year around doing less with more. Everyone is feeling it. It is hard right now. And the topics that I was covering with my customers were around creating efficiencies wherever we could. And while we were having business reviews and success plans and really digging into those key performance metrics, and you know, it was every quarter, or for some customers once or twice a year, we came with one topic that our customers should work on, and we assisted as well, and that was creating a reference guide around annotations so
Hmm.
that the reviewers and the initiators were both aligned with that process. Because it came back with, we are losing initiators or we're losing reviewers, and there's new reviewers that don't understand the process. So just making
Sure.
sure that we have a reference guide. This is
Mhm.
included in your SOP. And there were a lot of conversations with a lot of my customers around, I'm a reviewer, I'm leaving annotations, they aren't being replied to, they're being dismissed, ignored. Did it get applied into the new
Mm.
revision?
Okay.
So this reference guide, first, it has everything that you need to know about annotations. The reviewers, this is what you have access to. This is the toolbox that you have. Initiators, these are also the features that you have with the annotation. So just making sure that at the start, everyone knows what they have access to. And then also, there is time constraint, there's less initiators, there's so many annotations in a piece. How do they quickly, at a glance, look at the annotations and know how to move forward? This is why we created the quick reference guide, because it outlines the different ways that the reviewers can leave their annotations, where
Okay.
they'll understand how the initiators are going to move forward with
Mhm.
those annotations, so that there's no, well, what happened with my annotation? There's just clear alignment there.
Okay. Could you give an example of maybe what would be some of those guidelines? So is it, in our system, there are different annotation colors. Is there something around like that? Or just give an example so people can maybe start to the wheels turning for their own process, on the types of guidance that these reference guides have that are so helpful for no, these various people that are involved in the review process.
hmm That's one easy one that the team can apply right away, are annotation colors, because at a glance, initiators can see, okay, the red are required. I know how to move forward with those. Blue are suggestions. So let's take a look at those and see if we need to make those edits or revisions. So that's a quick and easy one for the initiators to, at a glance, look at the annotations. They know how to move forward. The other one is figuring out the process around replying to annotations. So again, this is included in the quick reference guide, making sure that this is in your SOP. If annotations that are in blue are suggestions, may not need a response. And the reviewers understanding that, and maybe the red do, or the opposite. But just understanding for both teams, reviewers and initiators, to know what's being replied to and what's not. And if it's not, that's why. So
Yeah,
that's easy.
and you can imagine the efficiencies that come out of this, right? Like if your expectation going in is that, or maybe there are no expectations on, are my annotations going to get replied to? Like, are we going to have a conversation about it? Going in knowing like, okay, if there's something I want to have a conversation about, I'm going to do is, I'm going to mark it in red or blue or whatever the case is. Then already there's alignment in terms of how to move forward, and you don't have this like extra back and forth going on in your chats or your emails on like, do we need to circle back on this or what's the deal? Like you can just imagine the clarity that some of these guidelines can provide to people so that there's just clear expectations on how to move forward and what to do. So I think this is really a helpful tip for people to consider.
Yeah, and I think the initiators appreciate it more, especially when there's less initiators this year for whatever reason, and they don't have the burden of, I have 10 pieces to review this week, and I have to reply to every annotation. Otherwise, I'm getting slacks and emails why I didn't respond.
Sure.
There's just a clear process around that.
Mhm. Yeah, that's great. Okay, I love that. I think that's like a super actionable tip. And, you know, the guidelines could take form of whatever folks want to focus on, or depending on their, review teams or their cultures. Like, I think beyond like the specific elements of the guideline, it's that to have a guide, because we know that teams are changing constantly, like just to have this additional reference point and put everyone on the same page going in, not only improves collaboration, it can be more efficient, but as we reference back to the benchmarks report, it can help bring down those job durations and review durations because there are clear expectations going into the review process.
Exactly. And that's something that, the customer doesn't have to do on their own. We already have a template, so they can use that and, add on to it. Just they don't have to start this from scratch. There's, suggestions that we already provide in that reference guide.
Absolutely. And it could be iterative too, I imagine, right? Like you might have things that you add early on the guide and then maybe there's a bottleneck or there's a consistent issue that's coming up. Okay, what a great place to put some more, stipulations or guidelines around something than like this documentation. So it's like a living, breathing document that I could see. I imagine people are iterating over time as well.
Exactly. And as we continue to build out features, of course, that changes in the first part of the reference guide. So yes, it's updated over time.
Awesome. Okay, love it. Great first tip. Anything else that you would share or tell folks as they're, have in the back of their minds, I'm being asked to do more with less, I'm going into this new year. What is something that you think folks could walk away with to think about?
Yeah, and this goes back also to annotations, which is what we were focused on this year with our customers, or at least my customers during business reviews and success plans. As we were drilling down into specific metrics, we realized that there were certain groups that had the least approval votes. So we dug a little deeper and we took a look at the annotations that they were leaving behind. And most often the initiators or the system owners that we spoke to, they already knew the type of feedback that they were leaving behind. And I took it upon myself to look at the annotation, see if there were themes, and there were themes, well-known themes. And that goes back to the quality of content that's being submitted for review. So that's a training opportunity for the initiators, agencies, whoever's helping creating that piece, taking that feedback that, let's say, regulatory reviewers have the least approval votes and they're leaving the same feedback for so many different pieces, taking that feedback, sharing it with marketing, initiators, agencies to ensure that before it gets routed for review, let's double check to make sure that this is already applied. This has been addressed in this piece, and then routing it for review. So that hits a few different things. Approval votes will go up. Um, there's less back and forth between the initiators and the reviewers,
Yeah.
and lesser annotations.
hmm And I think like What a great value story of having a system, because you do have record of the annotations over time. So you do have a reference point to go back to and say, hey, it seems like we consistently have issues with the imagery that we're using or a copyright or whatever the case may be. I think it's just one of the additional values of having that information at your fingertip, because otherwise it might get missed or that might not be able to be underscored as well than having like a consistent record of what the annotations are during the review process. And you can refer back to those and say, okay, here's some consistent issues we're running into. Let's work on those, especially if they are trying to, bring reviewer job duration times down. Just like knowing the information is so powerful.
Exactly. So they don't have to be huge changes that we're, applying and implementing. We know that people don't have that much time. So we're trying to find efficiencies wherever we can. And this has already helped improve a lot of the metrics with my customers where we address this early on in the year, which is
Mhm.
awesome to see.
Yeah, that's awesome. And to your point, a great way to continue to partner with your agencies. Your agencies also want to be successful. And so I can imagine having some of this like, hey, we seem to be running into like this consistent issue. Can we fix that, for the content that's coming in? Like the agency, that's also helpful information for them so that they can continue to improve the quality of the content that they're returning. I think it's like everyone wins or benefits from having that information. So another like way to continue to partner with or enhance the relationship with your agency.
I agree. More collaboration and everyone is just helping each other out with reviewers, marketing, agencies. It's really teamwork there.
Yeah, absolutely. What a great sentiment to sign off on. Elizabeth, thank you so much for your time. I think that these are exactly the best practices that we're looking forward to introduce alongside the benchmarks report, right? You always have the data and, the sense of what good looks like in terms of the review process. What a great layer to add on in terms of best practices for folks to think about as they go into a new year, which is hard to believe, right? And everyone, please go download the 2023 State of Promotional Review Benchmarks Report. You can download it at vodori.com/2023 benchmarks. And please be following us on LinkedIn. We're doing a whole series of videos related to the benchmarks report this year and encourage you to join in on the conversation. Thanks and have a great day.